this last video, we're going to talk about how we can try to look at fixing or updating items that we already have created without having to delete all of our sheets and reload them in situations that is possible, and talk about some of the options for the revisions and revision control options for your sheets. To start off with, we're going to talk about our piece marking. The first time you auto-load, it sometimes can be overwhelming, and maybe we got the names wrong. Maybe we have the piece marks here not the way we want them for our members. If the piece marking is just wrong, we picked the wrong orders or did something that's not going to be the same as the next time we want to do it, we can simply delete our sheets and re-auto-load with the new piece marking, since there's no possibility of any old marks conflicting with the new piece marks. If we're keeping the same auto-loading options, but we wanted to change something as far as the order of things on the sheets, or we need to reorder them, then we are going to have to run the auto-loading once to change the piece marks all to something else, and then delete the sheets a second time and reload them at the new piece mark. So let's take a look at some options for that. So instead of 1B1, let's say I want it to be 1A, 1B, 1C. All I would need to do is go into my utility functions, go to delete project items, go to my detail sheets, and I'm just going to delete all my sheets. I'm going to hit cancel and OK here. And now if I go back into Drawing Editor, you'll see that in my detail sheets, I have no sheets loaded. My details are still named because that's just the names of them now. But if I wanted to change those names, I would just reload them. So now at this point, I'm going to go to my detail sheet auto loading. I'm going to pick my sheets again. And if I want to change the naming, I could change it here and say I want the sheet number and then I want alphabetical progression. And the rest I'm going to have inactive. So this is going to be 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, etc. Because there's no possibility of that piece mark conflicting with the piece mark that already exists in my model, I don't have to do anything now besides auto-load and get everything back to the piece marks I want. If I wanted it to be 1B1, 1B2, 1B3, but I want to reload it so that I can get different piece marking or different orders on items, then I would need to do this step here where I'm changing it to something else first so I don't have any conflicting piece marks. If SDS2 is trying to load a beam on a sheet and call it 1B1, but 1B1 already exists on a different piece mark, it cannot assign that mark on that sheet. So we can't have piece marks that already exist with the piece mark we're trying to use. So that's why we were going to be going to just a generic piece marking. If I were to set this back to what it was for the member type designation and then order on sheet, I can add a simple option of just a period in here in the fourth character. So I just add an additional character now to the piece mark. There's no chance of it being interfering with the original mark, and when I come back to reload the second time to get the marks back to the original sheet marks, I can just remove this from my piece mark, and then I'm not conflicting with piece marks within SDS2. So if I were to add this in here and say OK, and in this case I'm going to make the minimum scale 50 just to load as many as it can onto sheets, just to get the piece marks all the change to something that I want it to go to so I can update it to the correct piece marks later. So I'm going to say OK. I'm just going to pick everything to load. And if some of them are still not going to fit, like this bill of material, that again might be something I have to load and manually fix for the piece mark, just like we did on the first time. So now if I say OK and go back into my drawing editor, you can see that my piece marks now, if I click on details, it'll update all the periods at the end of them. So if I want them to go back into my 1B1, 1B2, 1B3 piece marking without the periods, I would come in here and say delete project items again, select my detail sheets, delete all the sheets again, and now when I auto load I want it to be exactly what I need it to be my final piece mark. So I'm going to come in here, pick my sheets, I'm going to turn off my period, I'm going to go left to right, strict columns and rows, I'm going to leave it starting at 1, I'm going to leave the scale at 90. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to reload everything again. And I know I'll get some of those stairs that won't fit and that sort of stuff, but we'll get those loaded. And now they're going to be reordered to the new piece marking, as well as being able to get everything updated to the new piece marks that I want here. So again, these ones that won't fit because the bill material and the sizes, I'll have to reload again and change the sizes, which just change marks, which is fine. But I have everything reloaded again on my sheets in a new order. If I had things out of order, if I had stuff that I wanted to add and just redo all my piece marking again, I can just come in here and it'll all reorder everything for my sorting criteria. So let's say I realize that I made a mistake on my outline, and I go to my detail sheets here, and let's say that on my sheet outlines I had a note that I had provided just to put on the sheet, and I realized I had a typo in it, and I've already loaded all my sheets. I could delete my sheets and then try to reload. The problem I could have is then I'd have the same issue where I'd have to go to a different piece mark and come back, so I don't have any conflicting piece marks as it tries to load those items, and that they all get loaded on the correct sheet number. Instead, what I can do is, if I open one of my sheets, under my Edit pull down, I have Search and Replace, and Search and Replace in Selected Drawings. Search and Replace lets me look for a specific string of text and replace it with a different string of text. This only affects labels on your sheets. It does not affect the bill material, the sheet items, any sort of symbols like my title block here. It does not affect that. It only affects labels and items added to the sheet themselves. If you use Search and Replace in Selected Drawings and actually pick the details, it will search for labels and dimensions within that detail or the selected details itself. It will not search the bill of material, only labels and dimensions in the drawing or the sheet that you select. So I can search for a specific tag. Now what you want to be is very specific, and the larger the string is, the better it's going to be for Search and Replace, because it's going to search for only what you type in there. So if you had a letter A and you wanted to make it an AN because you misspelled A instead of an, you would want to make sure you looked for the entire string of that sentence or a couple words and not just the letter A, because it's going to find any A in any word and replace it with AN. So if you had the word search, SEARCH, it would become SEANRCH, because it's going to find any letter A and replace it with AN. So you could look for the space A space and replace with space AN space, so it needs to be an A by itself, etc. So you want to be extremely explicit with what you're searching for. And then you also have the ability to search and replace in Selected Drawings. So if you made this mistake on multiple drawings, you could run that search and replace on all the drawings at once and make that same search and replace. If you wanted to add something to all of your sheets at once and you forgot to put it on your sheet outline, there are ways to copy and paste to several, as well as adding a standard detail to several. So if you have a standard detail, and a standard detail is anything that you would have saved as either a job standard, so we have our title block, or our global standards, which are built-in standard details. If I just go into my drawing editor and open one of these, I can see there are things like stamp for approved. There's different versions of this stamp. There are going to be north arrows. Say I forgot to put a north arrow on all my sheets, and I want to add that north arrow to all my sheets. I could add that global standard to all my sheets at once. So if I were to go to Open, go to my detail sheets, I'm going to go ahead and open up my sheet 1, and I'm going to go to File, and I have Add Standard Detail and Add Standard Detail to Several. So just to show you how the Add Standard Detail works, I'll select Add Standard Detail, go to my global standards, and I'm going to go north. I'm going to say OK, and it's going to ask me to locate it. I can keep clicking on it. I can rotate it here with my Add Standard Detail. If I need to rotate it 90, I can rotate the north 90, whatever direction I want my north to be. When I'm done, I can right click, and now I have this north symbol on my drawing. If I wanted to add that to multiple, I'm going to delete this or undo, and I'm going to go back and say File, Add Standard Detail to Several, North 3, I'm going to locate it here. And it's going to say select the sheets that you want to add this to. Because I'm in a detail sheet, it only asks me to select other detail sheets that I want to add this to. If I was in an erection sheet to add this north arrow, I could then pick the erection sheets that I also wanted to add this standard detail to as well. In this case, again, since we just have our detail sheets, these are the only sheets I get to pick running this command this time. I could cancel and go to an erection sheet and run the command a second time for those erection sheets as well. So I'm going to pick all my sheets, but on the right hand side here I have prompt for location and confirm addition. So if my sheets are the exact same sizes and I wanted to add to every sheet without prompting me to save every sheet, I want to uncheck both of those. That way it just opens and places it in the exact same point in the exact same reference for the same sheet. If I had different sheet sizes, so I want to be able to pick the sheet sizes that I want. If I don't know which ones are which sizes, unfortunately there's no way to use for the hide or anything like that, but I can say prompt for location and it'll prompt me to place it on each individual sheet. It'll just come up, place it, save it, and go to the next sheet to place it and save it again. I'm going to uncheck both of these and just say OK. And it's going to go through and add those to all the sheets. If I were to go to open and say yes to save and go to my sheet 2, you can see that it placed it on that sheet as well. And just kind of go through all my sheets. It's placed at the same location on all the sheets for me. If I had a note that I wanted to create and add to all sheets as well, I can go back to my sheet 1, and let's say I just want to add a note for approval. We'll give it a 45 degree here. We'll make it a 7. Okay. And just kind of put that down here in the title block. Let's say I want to copy and paste this to all my sheets for me. So if I select this, I can right click, go to special, go to copy with reference point, and I can select a location now that I can snap to that's going to be the same for every sheet. So I'm just going to pick right here, and now I'll hit save and I'll go to the next sheet, right click, special, paste to several. I'm going to come in here and locate that exact point again. And again, I can pick the rest of these sheets and uncheck prompt for location and confirm addition and say OK. It's going to go through and add that for approval on all the sheets for me. So if I were to go to the next sheets here, I'll say yes to save. You can see that these sheets all have the same for approval tag down there in the bottom right. So again, using the search and replace, if I decide this is now for fab, I can come in here and I can say edit, search and replace and select the drawings. I can pick my detail sheets. I can select those sheets, say OK, and I want for approval to now say for fab. If I say OK, it's going to go through all the sheets searching for approval, and it's going to tell me that it's changed 49 items. So you can see for fab now. If I save and go to the next sheet, they're all set to for fab. If I wanted to come through here and I wanted to say edit, search and replace and select the drawings, the detail sheets. If I looked for fab and just left it blank for replace with, say OK, you can see that now it just has a tiny box because it's a blank label. But it took that label off the sheets by just leaving it blank. I just have a blank label now with nothing in it. And I don't have to worry about that plotting. That won't plot. That's just going to be an extra little item there on those sheets. So if you need to take a label off like that, you can just do it that way. Lastly, the revision charts on your sheet here allow you to show revision levels, a date, and a description for the revision. In this situation, I can go to my Objects, Revision Chart, Edit. And since I have on my actual sheet, I can give it a revision we'll say A. The date here, if I just tab or double click in there to fill out today's date, I can just say for approval, and it'll fill out the approval information here as far as the rev. If I wanted to make that change for all my sheets, I can just go to my edit pull down, change options, and I have an option to increment sheet revisions. So this allows me to increment my sheet revisions. I don't need to do sheet 1, I just did that. I'm going to go 2 through 49. I'm going to say OK, and I can say how do I want to increment it, numerically, alphabetically, or manually. Numerically, it starts at 0 and works up in numbers. Alphabetically starts at A and goes through the alphabet, and manually lets me pick whatever I want for the actual revision in the revision column. If you have numerically selected and the letter A or a letter was involved, it starts over at 0, regardless if there was already a 0 in that revision history at some point. It only looks at the last revision level and increments from there. So if it's a 0, it'll go to 1. If it's an A, it goes to 0. If it's a number, it goes to A. If it's already a letter, it goes to the next letter in the alphabet. So if I wanted all these to be alphabetical, the description would be for approval. The revision date is today's date. And if I had any of these user fields filled out here, which can just be extra columns, I could fill those out as well. When I'm done, I'll just say OK. And it's going to come up with a warning, but it's not really a warning. It's just giving me an output information about these sheets are all been incremented to A. So if I were to make sure I save, go to the next drawing, you'll see these also have revision A filled out in the actual revision charts themselves. The revision charts do not have to be visible for that information to be filled out. If I don't want my revision chart on there, I can take it off and just delete it. The revision information still stays in the revision chart itself. This sheet will always have the revision information stored in it if you're filling it out through the revision chart or increment sheet revision, regardless of whether that revision chart is actually on the sheet. Filling out the revision information through the revision chart is the only way to accurately get revision level information into exports to MRP, MIS, and EPM type software for FabTrol, FabSuite, Tekla EPM, any KISS exports, any of the actual MRP style exports that are going to come from your sheet or bill information. That's the only way to get that information into there is by using the SDS2 revision chart. So you don't have to have it visible, and one thing you can do is you can add a revision label, $rev, which is our special label. If I were to click here and just say $rev in all caps, I don't want it at a 45, I'll make it just 0 here. So I can just have the $rev show up right down here as a label. So if I were to save this, to plot just this sheet or just the drawing you're currently in, I can go to File, Print PDF. I'll just go ahead and save it into my folder here. And if I were to open it, you will see that the rev is filled out as A because of the $rev. And if I look closely, my date, time, and user all fills out when I plotted it. So you know what date this was plotted on and what user login plotted it. So if you come through and need to increment all your sheet revisions for approval, Rev A, and then you get everything back from approval and you need to set it all for Fab, you can go and increment all your sheets back to 0 to get all of your increment revisions and get your sheet revisions up to 0 for Fab. Or whatever you use for your Fab designation, you can increment all your sheets at once. You can increment a selection of sheets at a time. If you had a revision come back, you need to modify some drawings, you can mark just the sheets that have the drawings affected with that revision. You can also manually get the bill of material to show a revision on a line in the bill. So by default, we didn't have that turned on, but if I want to modify this bill of material layout just for the sheet, I can go to the rev here and I can make this a prefix. The rev is the only one that gets a prefix option, but that'll put it out here to the right in a triangle. Otherwise, if I have it set to one of the actual line options here, it puts it as its own column here for the revision level. So if I just say prefix, I will have to still change my default bill of material layout so that I can modify it in the actual member detail. So in my options, fabricator options, bill of material layout, I will want to make sure that my rev is set to prefix for the default bill of material. The default bill of material affects the actual bill of material in the drawing itself. So if I were to save this change on the sheet, then go into my drawing here, 2B1, if I go to bill edit, you'll see I have a rev column here. So if I say this right here changed, and this was rev A, I'll say OK and save. I can go to my open, go back to my detail sheets, and you'll see that next to the bill here, I have a rev A for this line. So if I had a bunch of changes and I've incremented my sheets and as I'm filling out the information or I'm flagging the information in that drawing, if I came back in here and just went to my 2B1 and let's say I just had a change on these angles, I could just flag these with a cloud. Or any other information that would have changed about them. Let's say the piece mark or something changed. I could cloud those as my revisions. As a standard detail, I have in my global standards a revision mark. So I can come in here and just put the revision mark next to these. And I could multi-edit the labels to say A. And then I have my revision triangles on there. I can shorten, save, and now if I go back to my detail sheets, I have not only marked up in my drawing changes to the angles, but in my bill, because I fill out the bill manually, I have it marked here in the bill. So you can see how you can increment the revision levels of all the sheets, whether it's for an actual revision in the model, whether it's for incrementing the sheets for fab, for approval, whatever state you need to issue the sheets for. And you can modify that information once it's been redetailed for those changes. So if I were to make an actual change in my model, you'll see that members get flagged for detailing. So if I go back to my model here, and let's go to a different sheet here, we'll just go up to our 4B2, and let's say I change this from a W18, let's make it bigger. So W21 at 55, and OK. You'll see the piece mark didn't change, but the number of rows upped on my connection here. So if I go to my detail members, I have 3 members that need to be redetailed because that change of connection affected both my beam and the columns that it connected to. So they're all marked for detailing. So if I know that these 3 were affected by that change, I could come in here and say OK. You can also save selection list. So those 3 members that are selected here, I can go to save and say rev B. I'll just let them redetail. And if I go back to drawing editor, go to my details, I know that I had 4B2. So I know that the size changed here. So if I wanted to, I could unshorten. I could come up here, I could cloud the size. I could cloud the connection changes here. And I could add that revision symbol again. Now, standard details can have bill of material information filled out, so if you don't want it to fill out the bill information, just uncheck that. And then I can go ahead and locate there. You can just come in here and zoom in and locate right there. And then I can place it up here as well. And hit cancel and right click. And that way it doesn't fill out any bill of material information for it. So I'll make this revision B. I'll right click and edit. Make this B for my revisions here. I'll go ahead and shorten it so it goes back down to the shortened drawing. And once I get that in there, I can go into my bill and I can say that these angles, the number of shot bolts and the number of field bolts all updated, as well as the main material. So I can say OK, save that, and if I go to the sheet, my detail sheets 4, I can see that I have my notes here that I manually added as well as the rev lines on the bill. I just don't have a rev B on here, so I could manually fill that out. Objects, rev chart, edit, B. I can fill out today's date. And I can say this was a change in size. Let's say this is a change order per engineering. So now I have the rev B on that sheet. If I save that now, I have this incremented at rev B and all my other sheets at rev A. And I could do the same thing for my columns there. If I wanted to go through and clean up all my columns that changed, and then go and increment the sheets all at once to rev B, and that would be a simple way of getting them all in there. So at this point, once we're ready to get everything detailed, we have it on sheets, we can just go to our plotting options. So I'm going to make sure I just open, I'm not in the sheet, and I have plotting and PDF drawing export. So PDF drawing export will allow me to plot any of my sheets. I can plot one document per sheet. So this creates a separate PDF file for every named sheet we have. So every single one of these will create its own file. Or I can uncheck this. It'll prompt me for a name for the single file and create one PDF with multiple pages in it for all the different pages here selected. You can also sort what sheets you want. If you don't want gather sheets, you just want detail and erection sheets, you can select that. So if I turn off gather sheets, don't need to worry about my destination here. I'm just going to uncheck one document per sheet, say OK. It's going to prompt me to save the name of this. It's just going to default to the plot name with the date and the time into your output folder of your 2020 directory. You can browse to wherever you want on your desktop or your computer to save this file. You'll see it working on the sheets and generating the PDF for you. And when done, you can launch it and you can see the PDF here created. You have all your different sheets that you can go through. So the one thing you can do when SDS2 generates these PDFs through PDF drawing export is that the details are bookmarked on every sheet. So you can see that I have sheet 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. and all the members bookmarked. So if I click on one of those, it takes me directly to that viewport of that member. So I can zoom in very quickly and find specific piece marks if I wanted to. This is a nice little tool to have for your PDF drawing export here. They can just jump to the drawings here all in one list. At any point, you might need to back up your project or pack your project. On the main menu, we talked about this project transfer. You can use project transfer to do a backup or to send the project to another customer. You can come in here and you can pick the job name. It's going to default to the one you're in, the directory location that you want to pack it to, the pack file name, and the job name inside that packed file. Again, you can include information within the project that you're using, like plugins, reports, and status configurations. If you're not sure if that user is going to have that information the same or not, once you're done, you can just hit pack, and it'll pack a copy of this project to the location you selected. It's important that you're not in any drawings or the modeling so that as it's packing it, it doesn't have any issues accessing the information to create that packed file. So you can see it creates a JFT file that you can then copy and paste or move to a backup utility or wherever you want for that project. So that's it for the SDS2 online basic training for this course. Please make sure that you download the additional references and the continuing references lists. They are documents that you can download with links to the YouTube page of SDS2 with additional videos and information about other features and updates to the software like model notes, reference drawings, reference models, a bunch of other additional information that we don't have time to cover in basic training. So download those, review those, and if you have any questions about anything you've seen, or any quizzes you've run into in this online training or in the future, feel free to contact support at sds2.com. Feel free to start a chat on our website through the support page, or feel free to call our support hotline at 1-888-883-2492. You can also find the same information for the hotline in the information down here. You have your support hotline here at 888-883-2492.